In 1947, the Indian subcontinent was literally torn into two. This event, the Partition of India, set off one of the largest and most violent mass migrations in all of human history. But the story we usually get is, well, it's often boiled down to a super simple explanation that might not be the whole story at all. So today, we're going to peel back the layers and try to understand what was really going on.
Okay, so let's dive right in. Typically, when we talk about partition, we hear one of two big stories. On one side, you've got the two-nation theory, this idea that Hindus and Muslims were basically always two separate, distinct peoples. And on the other side, you have the narrative that blames Britain's divide and rule policy. And look, both of these are really powerful stories, right? But as we're about to see, the deeper you dig, the more questions they actually create.
So to really get to the bottom of this, we've got to ask a much more fundamental question. Let's just forget about countries and borders for a second. How do massive groups of people, like Hindus or Muslims, even begin to see themselves as one single political team in the first place?
Well, there's one theory called primordialism. It basically suggests that these identities are just there. That they're ancient, they're natural, and they're a fixed part of who we are. But a historian named Paul Brass comes along and really challenges this. He argues that political identity isn't something you're just born with. In fact, a lot of the time, it's something that is actively made.
He calls it the instrumental approach, and it's kind of like a three-step playbook. So step 1, elite competition. You've got political leaders all fighting for power and influence. Step 2, symbol manipulation. To get an edge, these leaders pick out specific cultural symbols, things like religion or language, and start promoting them as the defining features of their community. And then step 3, group mobilization. They use those powerful emotional symbols to rally everyone together behind their political agenda.
And this isn't just theory. You can see this happening in real time in pre-independence India. Political elites started pushing the Urdu language as the unique symbol of Muslim identity, even though tons of Muslims spoke completely different languages. They used Muslim personal law to carve out a separate legal identity. And they took these really sensitive religious practices, like cow protection for many Hindus and cow sacrifice for some Muslims, and turned them into political wedges, deliberately drawing these sharp, hostile lines between communities.
So you see, this whole idea of making an identity wasn't just some academic theory. No way. It had huge, real-world consequences. And you can see it playing out perfectly in the politics of the All India Muslim League and its leader, Muhammad Ali Jinnah, especially as they started to craft this demand for a new nation they called Pakistan. Just look at this number, 4.4% in the big 1937 elections. That's it. That's the tiny slice of the total Muslim vote that the Muslim League actually managed to win. I mean, this tells you they weren't some political juggernaut. They were barely even in the game.
So what was going on? Why were they so weak? Well, historian Ayesha Jalal kind of hits the nail on the head here. She points out that the League just didn't have a strong, grassroots party machine that connected the top leaders with ordinary people. So, to fix this, Jinnah realized he needed one big, powerful idea, something that could unite Muslims from all over India, cutting through all the local politics and differences.
And that idea, well, it really took shape in the 1940 Lahore Resolution. But here's the kicker, you gotta look at the details. It demanded independent states. Notice that? Plural states. It never mentioned a single country called Pakistan. And really important words like sovereign were left completely undefined. This wasn't a clear plan for a new country, not at all. It was a brilliant but vague bargaining chip to force the issue and secure more power for Muslims within India.
Okay, but here's where the story takes a really dark turn. Because while all these politicians were up in the clouds debating maps and constitutions, something totally different and far more brutal was starting to happen down on the ground. This is where we shift from the high politics of the elites to the devastating reality for millions of people. And the historian Gyanendra Pandey highlights this huge, massive disconnect. Official history tends to talk about partition as this political deal, a constitutional arrangement. But if you talk to the survivors, the people who actually lived it, for them it was something else entirely. It was a sundering, a world literally being torn apart.
And that's why it's so helpful to think of this not as one partition, but as three partitions,
all happening at the same time. First, you had the political demand for Pakistan. Second, you had the actual territorial division, the carving up of massive provinces like Punjab and Bengal. And then you had the third, the one history books often forget, the human cataclysm, the violent, bloody destruction of families, villages, and communities.
You know, for the people who survived this, partition wasn't really the word they used. They called it Maramari, which just means the killings. Or they called it Raula, the tumult, the chaos. For them, this wasn't about a new constitution. It was about violence, it was about loss, and it was the sudden, horrifying end of the only world they had ever known.
So out of all this fire and chaos, two brand new countries are born, India and Pakistan. But how is it that from day one they went down such completely different political paths? Well, the answer really lies in what they inherited on that first day of independence.
The starting points could not have been more different. Think about it. India basically inherited the entire existing government of the British Raj, a fully functioning, ready-made state. Plus, the Congress Party was this huge, well-oiled national machine. Pakistan, on the other hand, had to build its entire central government from absolute scratch. The Muslim League just wasn't as organized, and on top of that, the new country was immediately swamped by a massive refugee crisis and huge security threats.
And this one huge difference had these massive knock-on effects. In Pakistan, this overwhelming need to just survive, to build a state, manage crises, and defend its borders, created what Ayesha Jalal calls a political economy of defense. Power naturally shifted away from the politicians and towards the institutions that could guarantee survival, the non-elected military and the civil bureaucracy. And that decision would shape its politics for decades to come.
So, what have we seen? Partition wasn't one neat story, but so many. It's a story of high-stakes political strategy, of unimaginable human tragedy, and of two new nations starting their journeys from vastly different places. It's a powerful reminder that nations aren't just these ancient natural things. They are constructed, often through intense political struggle and sometimes immense violence. And that leaves us with one last big question to think about. If nations are made, what is it that actually holds them together?